During my first visit, I was astonished and irritated because I had come from a military city where on February 24th at 4 a.m. military action started and continued till today. And being in the condition that I was in, these songs and dances appeared to me as, I don't know, the first days of plague. And in the beginning, it, I guess, scared me, turned me away. I wasn't trying to hear the lyrics of the songs. I was just crying and couldn't understand how in only about 400 miles there was a completely different life. Peaceful, calm. When we arrived here, we saw work in cafes, restaurants, people walking downtown giving each other flowers. Before leaving Kharkiv, I couldn't get home. We lived in such a district where it was impossible to get into the apartment, to at least pack some stuff. We rushed out, wearing clothes that we used to walk our dogs. So we left the apartment at 4 a.m. and never got back before leaving Kharkiv, because there was boom, boom, boom. That's why, of course, when I came to church and saw it, I was shocked. I can't say why I came again and then again and again.
Peace be with you, friends. Victoria's story is very interesting. They, as many people of Kharkiv, were forced to flee their hometown when the full-scale invasion of Russia into Ukraine started. It's about how she got in Vinnytsia, how God miraculously saved them. It's about how they met the Lord, how they got to know God, and, of course, how they met the church. She's going to tell you her story.
On February 24th, we woke up from the earth trembling. We look through the window and see everything on fire. The earth is on fire. And I'm standing and telling my husband, no, it's not a war. Maybe a gas station exploded. We see it and can't believe it. It's some absurdity. But we realize we have to run. We take the children and my mom, she's 85 years old. And we understand that we have to stick together. When we get to the subway, we all hide inside for the first 24 hours. It's impossible to take a seat. You can only stand since the place is crowded. And what amazed me the most was that everyone was with their pets. We also had a 5-kilo Chihuahua that had been pretty aggressive outside. However, all cats, dogs, rats, and hamsters, all of them were sitting still. No one was paying attention to anything, and there was no barking or meowing. Even they realized we had to live through that moment to sit it out. So on the first days, we were hiding in the subway, and then we found some basement of a hospital where we could also hide for some time. Later, we reached out to my sister, who lived downtown in an old building with the 3-foot wide walls. With some sort of miracle, with the God's help, we could make it to her. And she was so happy we were alive. There were 8 of us, plus 2 dogs and 2 cats, in a closed apartment, with no food or medicine. We had tap water. Having no idea what to do, we heard shelling every day. Well, we could endure just shootings, but when they started to attack with the Air Force, those planes were flying just above buildings, making such noise that brought real fear. That was the moment when we realized we had to leave, because at any moment we could die. So we decided to leave Kharkiv. I had 2 of my kids and a nephew who had gone through oncology. We signed up for the last evacuation bus and get on board. From there, we get to Dnipro, to some sort of intermediate point from which we can go to the west of Ukraine or choose our own way. Well, I don't want to go far since I'm sure it will last just a couple of weeks. I have to come back home. My husband is there, my mom, my dog, my home is there. So I say, kids, we're not going to go any farther. We should wait out here. Renting any accommodation is impossible. Everyone is panicking. Leaving the city isn't possible either, only by evacuation trains, no buses at all. And once again, God sent me a helping hand. My son's classmate could flee to a neighboring town and rent an apartment there. So he comes to us, to Dnipro, and drives us to Kremenchuk. There, by a phone call, risking being scammed, we transfer money to a completely unknown person and rent an apartment. All goes well. I asked the owner if there are any bed sheets, since we have nothing on us. We could bring only one backpack, each which couldn't fit much. I tell the owner that we've only got one blanket for each and underwear. That's it. The owner replies that there's nothing in the apartment, but that she will ask the neighbors and provide us with everything. When we come there, we see blankets, canned tomatoes, pickles, and other canned food. So we settle in Kremenchuk for a few weeks. But the situation is getting worse and worse. Also, we didn't notice where we were renting the apartment. It is located in a two-story wooden bunkhouse near a military unit where lots of soldiers are brought every day, where they are making Molotov cocktails and preparing some weapons. We realized that if that until is attacked, our bunkhouse will be destroyed. And when you already know how these shootings work, you understand a possible threat. We decide to leave this town, so I was leaving my hometown with 3 kids. Now I have another one, 2, and an adult kid. But still, no one has any idea what to do next. Everyone's looking at me asking, what do we do, Auntie Vicky? Well, what can Auntie Vicky say when in peaceful time, at the age of 50, everything was taken from her? And I'm not talking about material things right now. It's about not knowing what to do and how to live next. So we're continuing our trip since I'm bearing responsibility for these kids. Well, right now, as I remember of all of this, I understand that God wasn't just leading me, holding my hand. He was literally carrying me in His hands. So we left Kremenchuk and on our way found a place to rent in Vinica. Again, nobody scammed us. Yes, it was a one-room apartment. Yes, we were 5. But it was warm. It wasn't in the street. It was comfortable, but it was across the house of officers that would also be attacked later. And again, I don't know how upon hearing this whistle, we all got up and ran to the hallway. I know what pushed us to do so. All 3 of us just got stuck in the doorway. So when the explosion happened, none of us got hurt. All the windows were broken, and we took some pictures of the rocks that I could hardly fit in my hands, but we didn't get hurt. Then, when another factory was attacked, we also were standing in a line close to it. And again, nothing hurt us.
I do believe that there are no coincidences, especially when people meet God. And that's what was happening in Victoria's life. It seemed to be such a terrible situation, the war, destruction, that forced flight from their hometown. Then she arrives in Vinica, but apparently God had His plans.
I was invited to church by a woman who gave us her apartment for rent. Later, I started to go there myself. I wasn't coming with her because at the moment I believed I was impossible to put up with. I was constantly crying all the time, and I hated everything. Then, when I started hearing the lyrics of the songs and I understood it was worship and not just fun, then I came to realize there was a certain structure, worship, prayer. Well, you, Pastor, it's another conversation because I wouldn't have stayed if it hadn't been for you. Every sermon was clearly preached to me. I would think about something during the week, and then on Sundays I would come and receive answers to my questions. I didn't even want to dress up for the service. I didn't want anything. And then you came up and say, "What if the war lasts long? We don't know when it will end. We're gonna have to restore the country, raise children, do something, and we are all mentally and physically crushed." And I thought, that's right, how am I gonna come back? Not only am I not quite healthy mentally, but what if I also won't be healthy physically? I think to myself, he's so right. So I went to the hairdresser, then I went to the doctor. I decided to get my teeth treated. GC, you grabbed my attention with your sincerity. And when you were saying, "Can you hear what I'm talking about?" I was so pleased that you wanted me to hear and understand you. You weren't indifferent to whether we would hear what you felt. That hit me. I clearly understood that every sermon I was listening to on Sundays it had been prepared for me. And that they had all the answers to all my questions. Every time I felt better and better and better. The hatred I'd been physically suffering from was leaving. I came to realize that probably there was a reason for everything happening around us. God had probably had enough of our behavior. So the journey I've been through at church during this year and a half would probably be impossible to have in my whole life if I didn't have the war. It's very good that I got to hear the first sermon. You preached about how we shouldn't hate Russians. Perhaps that was the moment when I realized I was ready to hear you. And I heard you, but I wasn't really able to act on it until I understood that I was choking myself with anger. I started to feel so bad that the next sermons I would get to the back of the hall, and when you were praying for peace, for our soldiers, I would always imagine all those bullets and rockets that were flying towards Ukraine. I was imagining them flying back, that Russians were dying from their own shells. I was putting so much energy, rage, and hatred into it that I myself started to feel bad. I couldn't even sit through the whole sermon. This is how much I was exhausted from it. So again and again, I understood I was only hurting myself. I couldn't sit through a sermon. I was falling asleep or crying all the time. I was torturing myself. That was when I came to realize that you were right, Pastor. Now I don't know how I can say that I forgive them, but I can say these words as Jesus did on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing. This is what I now can say, and say it sincerely. And I sincerely believe that many of them really don't know what they're doing, because humans cannot act this way.
It's amazing how a person's life can change during 1 year. In one day, everything can change. We are living today, but we don't know what will happen tomorrow. That's why I asked Victoria if she could imagine that so many changes would occur in her life, that everything would change like that in her life.
No way I could. Never. I was like many people who say, I do believe, but I won't go to church. I believe at home. No, I wouldn't believe he would change me and change me in such a way that he would change my mindset. Also, my daughter proudly called herself an atheist. And later, we were baptized together. She seems to know about God even more than me. Her knowledge amazes me sometimes, how she understands different situations. No, pastors, I would never believe it. And more than that, I'm starting to accept myself. Not only do you accept God, but you start to accept yourself in an absolutely different way.